No way? Another training commentary?
Hey guys, this time I've got all 5 days recorded, at least their main movements. I just want a clearer picture of what's going on with my training, just because when I'm able to commentate over the footage, I get to probably notice things that I don't notice during the actual training, and it also helps out my coach, Alex. Besides that, let's get right into squats. You know what it is, boys. 210 tempo paused squats. First set right here at 365, 4 reps, prescribed RPE is 6. This was probably a perfect 6. It might have been a little less. Felt really good. One thing I was working on is keeping the same torso position the entire time. One thing that Alex noticed, mostly on my back offs which aren't paused or tempo, is that my upper back my posterior chain in general tends to take over, but I think I'm doing a much better job here. And one thing that really signifies that to me is that I can feel my quads, my glutes, and especially my hamstrings and my glutes working a lot more than usual. And I never used to feel those muscle groups during squat. So I think that's a pretty big deal, being able to actually make use of those groups just to stay tighter in the hole. This adds a lot more stability. And it probably honestly takes a lot of pressure off my knee since I'm not being as quad dominant as I usually am. That was 375, that was like an RP of 6. So I decided to move up to 395. I was tempted to just go to 405, 4 plates would have been pretty nice, but I think 395 was a pretty good call. Slight undershoot on the RPE, 7.5, but a technique suffered just a tiny bit. As you can see, my torso position isn't quite as good as the previous 2 sets. Of course, it was at RP 8. I haven't done a set of RP 8 squats in months since I started with Alex, so things are looking really good now. These are back offs. Alex told me to take these a little slower than last week. I'm not too sure if I actually did achieve that. I'd say I probably have more control over the bar in general, but there's still a bit of work to be done. Both of these back offs were at 375, so felt pretty good, felt pretty easy. I think the RP was around 5. I definitely felt my lower back taking a bit of a beating, and Alex has told me that that's probably what I need to work on, my posterior chain and a lot of that stuff. In general, kind of have a bad relationship with bench press right now. Nothing really seems right, nothing seems awful either. It's just in limbo and I don't like it. This is my top single at RP 5. I think this ended up being at 5.5 just because I was feeling my right pec quite a bit. Also, you could see the bar kind of like twisting in motion. It wasn't really a straight path. That was just because I was kind of favoring my left arm. It gets a lot better throughout these sets. This next back off is 5 at RP 8 is a prescribed RPE, so I put 259, which is literally what I did the week before, but it just felt like dog shit. It's very obvious on the last rep that I'm struggling. I rated it as a 9.5, and I think that's pretty accurate because there's no way. Maybe I could have gotten one more if I like bounced it off my chest. The rest of the back offs were just done at 242.5. I wanted to go light enough for practice. The sets anyways are supposed to be between 5 to 6. This first set of 242.5, that was around 6, but as I started noticing a couple other things about my bench and my setup, the RPE kind of winded down to a 5, plus I increased my rest times. That was probably another big factor. One thing that I did do was kind of tuck my chin in a lot more, and I talked to Alex about it somewhat briefly, and basically just kind of quote-unquote gluing your neck to the bench increases your upper back tightness, so you don't end up moving a lot, especially during an extended set. So last set, probably it looked the best out of all the other sets, at least in terms of the perceived effort. And now for the most famous lift, the deadlift. Finally getting back to singles, as my hamstring is doing much better. It's pretty much back to normal at this point. 534 point something on the bar for a single. It felt like a 6, but it looks like a 7 just because the setup wasn't really that great in terms of like the absolute weight on the bar. It felt easy. It was just awkward getting it off the ground. Another 10 by 2 just like last week with 445. Nothing's changed in terms of the weight. I think I was probably taking a little longer and probably thinking a little more for that first rep. I think the thing is I'd probably have to directly compare it to last week's footage. It felt good. Just one thing that I don't like is kind of the rocking of my hips as I pull the bar up. Uh, like what we've been trying to work on and what's probably ideal is just keeping the hips in place as the bar gets pulled, probably like that rep that we just saw. Just again a little inconsistent, just gotta iron things out. Probably as the sets progress, I tend to do a little bit better since I think just a bit more about my form. The first few sets are kind of like a mental warm-up to get everything locked in place. While that might be a good thing, I do need to work on having the same amount of quality in my earlier sets. Just like a powerlifting competition, I'm not going to have a bunch of practice singles before I hit the only 3 singles I get during competition day. This is probably what, like set 7, set 6. In terms of the absolute RPE and just how I felt for the entirety of the 10 sets, still pretty easy considering next week we're moving up to 455. I think that makes a lot of sense. Training is going to continue like this for around the next 2 weeks, and then it's a deload, and after that it's the start of a new block, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, this is my 9th set going on my 10th set. Kevin in the background, he actually joined me on my fitness journey. Hopefully he sticks around, but it's a great gym to be at. I'm there training him. Hopefully we get all of his lifts up to, I don't know what he's doing over there, but maybe he'll make it to the 1,000-pound club by the end of the year. And we're back to bench press from day 4. So this is my variation bench. Basically it's a slightly closer grip and it's around a 3 count tempo. I showed this off last week, and one thing I was doing was just kind of when I reached the chest, I let the bar drop and then shoot back up. And I think I've definitely fixed the issue. Alex told me to just, lightly touch the chest, almost come to a stopping point, and then go from there. It was a 4x6. That was the first set. Pretty much every set other than the last I took around 220.5 pounds. These first 2 sets were around an RPE 5. They felt really, really good. This was probably the most solid bench day I've had in a while, just in terms of the form, technique, everything just felt like perfect. Although the weight isn't really that heavy, it just felt a lot better. Especially the whole chin tucking thing helped considerably for this bench particularly. Third set here, I think I accidentally do 7 reps, just kind of miscounted it, but the RPU is still pretty low, around a 6, so that was pretty good. What is this, the 5th rep or so, and then here's rep 6, and then in my head I thought I was only at 5, so I went ahead, did the next one, and it felt, oh here we go, this is 7, it felt a little off, so I knew something was wrong. I looked back at the footage and, I'd done 7 reps. This is 228. I went a little heavier just because having done 220.5 for those first 2 sets at RP 5 and then 220.5, mistakenly done 7, but it still felt like a 6. Then I can probably up the weight and do that for 6 reps. And what do you know? This ended up being around RP 6. So RPE was pretty much spot on, so it is a pretty good tool for training. Next up, we'll probably have the tempo squats, so you guys will just see my last rep, boom, and we shall leave for squats. Now, I pretty much never record day 5, but it is the day where I use my squat shoes, my heeled lifting shoes, and it definitely feels very different to the flats, just because I've been squatting in flats a lot more than heeled shoes for the past few months. So I literally have like twice, 3 times, maybe more than that amount of time and practice using flats, so heels feel a little awkward, but I am slowly getting readjusted back to using them. This is just a tempo squat. It's a little vague. I think I try to go for around a 2 count. It's whatever count I feel comfortable with, and since I've been doing 2 count this whole time, I'd rather just stick with that. I might try a 3 count, but since I've been doing this for a couple weeks, I'll just stick with it up until possibly the next block or something. But yeah, it felt pretty good. These were sets of 6, so doing sets of 6 with a weight that I haven't done sets of 6 with, like in terms of it being like heavy for 6s, pretty good. All these sets were around an RP of 6. Probably the last 2 were like a 6.5. I just felt a little fatigued, but the weight still felt pretty light on my back. Looking back on it, I've just gotten so much better at bracing, keeping my core tight than how I used to squat. And I'm talking about like last year, where I do pretty much Olympic style squats and I wouldn't be bracing, and it would just be a lot more exaggerated when I'd be doing a good morning out of the hole. While there's still like some of that, it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be. Also, Jay Cutler made a visit to DMV Iron this day. Too bad I didn't really get a big picture with him. I'm not a big bodybuilding guy, but I do regret not, going and asking for a picture, just because it's like, you don't normally see Jay Cutler in your gym, right? Yeah, finishing up here, pretty clean. One thing I would like to fix is that my knees kind of cave in just a little bit, especially with the squat shoes. Never happens with the flats. On day 5, I always have a tempo comp grip bench. It's 2-1-0 count, so 2 count eccentric going down, and a 1 count pause. The other bench was taken. This one was actually also taken for a while, so I had to wait, and did not want to bench on a fat pad. Main reason, I'm not competing on a fat pad. Second reason, I thought it would be easier. It's not. Third, it's pretty high off the ground, so the angle between my hips and my quads and everything is very different as opposed to the normal Alico bench that I'm usually benching on. That first set was around RPE 6, just as the program says. It felt like a 6. I wish it was heavier or the RP was less. Just bench is not feeling too good. Second set, I decided to go a little heavier, as I'm supposed to hit around RPE 7. Also changed up the angle just because I wanted to see how I was stacking my joints. It's pretty decent. I would like to move my shoulders a little more under my chest. Last set here, I just went all the way back down to 242.5, as I'm supposed to go back down to RP 6. This set was at 6.5. Again, bench just being really inconsistent. Hopefully I figure something out, or Alex does, for the next block of training, because I'd actually like to progress on this movement, not just on my squats and my deadlift. But yeah, we're just finishing up here. Again, another angle. I kind of wanted to see what my legs were doing, and how I was touching on the chest, just from a different perspective. And I'd say the pauses are good, but they do need to be a little bit longer, as it's not quite 1 Mississippi long. That about does it for this week. Very, very long video, 14 minutes, so I'm just going to cut it off right here.